question about setting up 3 different trailing rules for a stop loss. Yeah, so as the profit for the trade increases, the stop loss is going to step up from the 100 EMA to the 50 EMA and then to the Parabolic SAR. Okay, so BlackBird open. So let me get rid of this profit target here. All right, so this question here focuses on the stop loss here. So again, I'm just going to use a market entry order since it doesn't matter. So let's go into the stop loss here. So the stop loss is going to start off at the 100 EMA. And let's see here. So we don't have anything on the quick list here to help get us started. So we'll just go with the custom stop loss there and build it from scratch. All right, open up the stop loss and let me go on to the options tab here. So remember, the first thing you need to set up with your stop loss or profit target is the initial placement here. So let's go into the initial placement. And so the mode, right, we're not interested in using the entry price or any bar price. What we want is an indicator value, right, because we're going to set the stop loss to the 100 EMA. So, all right, so set mode to indicator value. And the indicator, well, let's replace that SMA with the EMA. So there is our EMA. And let's set it to a 100 EMA. All right, there we have it. Okay. So that's the first step, right? Our stop loss is going to start off at the 100 EMA. Now let's go into the trailing actions here. And we're going to set the mode to custom. And now we can start creating some custom trailing rules here. So let's add our first trailing rule here. All right, so we're just going to trail the EMA 100. And so, yeah, the stop loss is just going to follow the 100 EMA regardless there. So we don't need a trigger for this, but we do need to go into the action and we need to set the action up to move our stop loss, to keep moving our stop loss to the EMA, right? So again, we're going to set our mode to indicator value and go in here and set up the EMA once again. So there's our EMA and put it in a 100 period. There we go. And then lastly, we're going to go into the repeat, right? Because in order for a stop loss to trail, right, you need your trailing rule to keep repeating. And that's what, right, the repeating of the trailing rule is what tells BlackBird to keep moving that stop loss to the EMA, to the new EMA's value, right? So the repeat, we're going to set that to indefinitely. And because it's an indicator, right, it's only going to be once per bar, right? So indicators only update once per bar. So, all right, so there we have it. So there's our trailing the EMA 100. So there's no trigger, right? So there's no trigger because trailing the EMA 100, right? That's the initial trailing behavior, right? That we want our stop loss to follow. So, all right. So now let's add another trailing rule here, and so this time we're going to trail the EMA 50 at 2 ATRs of profit. So now for the trigger mechanism, we need to monitor the trade and wait for 2 ATRs of profit. So we're going to go and pick the profit or loss option here. And so the mode is we're looking for a profit, and the units is not currency, but it's going to be ATRs. And of course you can set your ATR period there, whatever you want. And then we want a minimum ATR profit of 2. Right, so there we go. So that would be a 2 ATR profit that we're looking for. Right, and of course this is going to be unrealized profit, unrealized. So once we get to at least 2 ATRs in profit, then our action is going to be, once again, we're going to use an indicator value here, and instead of the EMA 100, now we want the EMA 50 period. And again, our repeat is going to be set to indefinitely, right? And since we're following the EMA, again, it's going to be once per bar. Right? So, all right, so there's 2 trailing rolls. And the third trailing roll is at 4 ATRs of profit. So let's add another trailing roll here. Let's see, I'm just going to copy that name, paste that in there. All right, so we're going to trail the Parabolic SAR at 4 ATRs of profit. All right, so once again, let's go into the trigger mechanism, and we're going to select our profit or loss again, set the mode to profit, set the units to ATRs, and enable the minimum amount and increase that to 4 ATRs. There we go. To 4 ATRs, like so. And then the action, right, we're going to go into the Move To menu. And again, change our mode to indicator value. And then go into the indicators list, and we got to scroll down to the P's. There's the Parabolic SAR. And of course, remember to adjust any of the Parabolic SAR settings if you're using custom settings there, like so. All right. And also, just to remind you guys, you can always add an offset from an indicators, right? So we could go 2 ticks below the Parabolic SAR, right? If you wanted to add a little bit of an offset from your indicator, right? You can always do that. So, but let's set it back to 0 there. And once again, with the repeat, we're going to set the repeat to indefinitely. And once again, the Parabolic SAR is an indicator, so it's going to be once per bar, right? So that is how you would set up a 3-tiered trailing stop loss there. So the key here is setting up the triggers, right? The stop loss is going to be jumping from one indicator to another indicator based on the profit, right, of the trade. So the trigger is monitoring, the 2 ATRs of profit versus, and then the 4 ATRs of profit. And the way that all 3 of these trailing rolls work, so there is another key understanding here, which is that, let's see here, right? So initially, right, your stop loss is going to start off with the EMA 100. And then once your trade has achieved two ATRs of profit there, now the trailing rules here, or BlackBird has a decision to make. It now has two trailing rules that it can follow. And the way BlackBird decides which, so BlackBird needs to decide, is it going to trail the EMA 100 or is it going to trail the EMA 50? And the decision is based on the evaluate using. So the evaluate using here is it defaults to whatever action brings the stop loss closest to the market price, right? So closest to price, right? And I would assume that, normally, right, the EMA 50 is going to be closer to the market than the EMA 100, right? But if you get into a trade, right, and your EMA 50 is currently less or further away to the market price than the EMA 100, well, then BlackBird's going to continue to trail the EMA 100 until the EMA 50 gets closer to the market price, right? Because, and the reason for that is because the standard for stop losses is you never move your stop loss further away, right? So if the EMA 50 was further away than the EMA 100, if BlackBird just blindly followed these trailing rules, right, your stop loss would move backwards, right? It would move away, it would widen. So, right, but that's not standard behavior that people want. So, yeah, so keep in mind here that when you have multiple trailing rules like this, once all the triggers have been triggered, right? So in this case, right, once two ATRs of profit is achieved, and then lastly, once 4 ATRs of profit has been achieved, now BlackBird has 3 trailing rules to choose from. So it's going to take a look at the action, calculate which one of those actions would bring the stop loss, closest to the market price. And, just based on these actions, the Parabolic SAR is probably always going to be closer to the market price than the EMA 50 or the EMA 100. All right. So I think that should do it for Dean's question here. Yeah, let's see. Dean's asked, can I give an overview of the evaluate? Okay, yeah, which I just did there. So, yeah, I guess if you look at all the options for evaluate using, right, this sets up the decision making for multiple order sets here. Or I'm sorry, for multiple trailing rules. Here. So if you wanted to keep your stop loss as wide as possible, you could choose the action furthest from price. But again, BlackBird is not going to move your stop loss further away. It's just going to pick the trailing rule that keeps that stop loss further away. So, right, so when BlackBird has 3 trailing rules to choose from, it's going to use the trailing rule that calculates a price that's furthest away from the market price, but it's not going to move your stop loss backwards. So, and let's see. Yeah, so I guess while I'm at it here, let me pull up the documentation here for the trailing actions here, right? So the trailing actions tab here is definitely probably the most complex part of BlackBird, right? This is really what gives BlackBird most of its power and uniqueness, beyond anything else that's out there, is this mix and match capability with the trailing actions here, right? So everything else is pretty straightforward, right? I mean, risk management, pretty straightforward, easy to understand. Money management, again, pretty straightforward stuff. simple to understand. Scheduling, when BlackBird's allowed to trade and not trade, pretty straightforward, right? So the trailing actions here, yeah, the most complex part of BlackBird there. Let me pull up that documentation for you. So if you're going through this and you have any questions, well, what does this do? Well, we could just go to the help menu, pull up the documentation right there. And so there's the BlackBird side menu here. And you want to go into the order sets, right? So those trailing actions, right, is a part of the order sets menu there, right? And if you ever need kind of a reminder as to what the different components of BlackBird are, we could look on the order settings window, right? Click on the order settings window here, right? And this image here breaks BlackBird's interface into the three components, right? So you have the management buttons on top, the trade signals in the middle, and the order set menu near on the bottom there, right? So we want to go to the order sets menu here. So let me click on the order sets. And so if I scroll down, all right, so here's the order options tab. So the options tab. And if we keep scrolling down, here is the trailing actions tab. Right, so everything below this, just gives you a written explanation to all the trailing rule components there. Right, so here we go. So right here, the evaluate using, right? So there's a description for the different evaluate modes there, right? So there's action closest to price, action furthest from price, as I mentioned. All right. So there you go. So underneath the trailing actions tab is an explanation of all the different components and parts and pieces that make up the trailing actions menu. Right. So like here's a section on the trigger conditions. All right. And again, what's the trigger conditions? Well, there you go. That's this column here called trigger on, those are the trigger conditions. Dean is asking, there is an option to expand the stop loss. Is that only under manual trading? Oh, okay. You mean widen the stop loss. No. So the menu items to widen your stop loss, is to allow automation to widen the stop loss. So, if you're trading manually, you can grab your orders, you can grab your stop loss and move it around anywhere you want, right? BlackBird is not going to tie your hands and prevent you from moving your stop loss while the trade is active. Even if you have BlackBird set up as an auto trader, you are still allowed to grab your stop loss or profit target and move them anywhere you want, during the automated trade, right? So in other words, you can manually override, any trailing rules that you set up. So so here, let's pull up what Dean's talking about here. So if you do want to automate, the ability to widen your stop losses, there's two things you have to do. One is you have to go into the risk management and allow widening of stop loss during a trade, right? And again, this is for trailing rules. So this allows your trailing rules to widen the stop loss. You can always grab a stop loss on the chart and widen it yourself manually, right? You can always do that. You don't have to have this checked in order to do that. So, right. So now with the risk management, that option, you know, basically disabling widening or enabling widening the stop loss. Now what you can do is you can go in here and so for example, let's pick the trailing the EMA 50 at 2 ATRs, right? So now you can go into the action and the allow movement, we can say both directions, right? So this would allow BlackBird to actually widen that stop loss. If the 50 EMA was further away than the 100 EMA, BlackBird could now do that. But a couple of things actually need to occur first. So for the trail 100, right? So for this, right? So for the initial trailing here, what we'd need to do is I could go into the profit or loss. I can add a trigger to this to place some limits on it. So there. Right. So, oh wait, is that min? Oh, I picked the wrong one. There we go. There. All right. So I can use the profit or loss and use the maximum amount. So let's see here, and then let's see, go into the repeat and enable the only repeat when re-triggered. So yeah, do something like that. So what this does is for the trailing the EMA 100, this places a limit here. So as long as the profit has a maximum amount of 1.9 ATRs, then keep trailing the EMA 100. And so as soon as the trade achieves 2 ATRs of profit, well, 2 ATRs of profit is more than the maximum amount allowed here, which is 1.9, right? So this is a maximum amount of profit allowed, right? So once the profit goes, so as long as the profit is underneath 1.9, then this trailing rule, you know, remains in effect. Once the profit goes beyond this maximum amount, so to 2 ATRs, then this gets then this is no longer triggered. So the trigger is no longer triggered anymore, and so that effectively would turn off the trailing for the EMA 100, and then the only trailing rule that would take effect would be this trailing rule to follow the EMA 50, right? So once 2 ATRs of profit is hit, and so with the action, right, having the allowed movement set to both directions, and also in the risk management we're allowing the stop loss to widen, then since there's only one trailing rule here that is active, right? Because again, the trigger for trailing the EMA 100, right? That trigger has been basically has turned off, has been deactivated. So BlackBird can't use the trailing EMA rule anymore. So only this one trailing rule is now actually active. And so with that, BlackBird only has one choice to make, which is to trail the EMA 50. And so if the EMA 50 is further away than the EMA 100, then BlackBird will move that stop loss further away to the EMA 50. That would be an example. Probably not a good example, but that would be an example of a trailing rule widening a stop loss. So, right. So there's two things have to be done. One is go into your risk management and allow widening, and then in the actions, you have to have an action that allows movement, either in both directions, or at least against direction only. So I can't imagine anybody really using the against direction only, since that's always going to move your stop loss away. But yeah, the against direction would probably more commonly be used for profit targets. So if you wanted to keep pushing your profit target further out, you might use this. You might use the against direction only. So normally, if you wanted to allow your stop losses to move further away or pull back in, then using both directions is probably the most commonly selected option there. Yeah, just to demonstrate here. Let's go long. Oh, yeah, all right. I guess I need to put the EMAs on the chart. Oh, yeah. So there we go. So both my EMAs are above the market, so I can't take a long trade. So let's go short. There we go. So there's the EMA on the 100, right? And of course I can always grab it and move it wherever I want, right? Move it way out of the way. And I can override, the trailing rules. I can override them. And then if you want your trailing rules to activate again, then that's part of what the order monitor panel can do for you. Okay. Let's open that up. And right here we can see that the auto trailing has been turned off, right? Because I manually grabbed my stop loss and moved it. So if I want my stop loss to trail again, then I can turn the auto trailing back on, and there we can see, boom, my stop loss is now following the EMA 100. Now it just moved to the EMA 50 right there, right? And if I want, I can grab my stop loss, move it out of the way, and again, that's going to turn off the trailing rules, right? So we can see the auto trailing has been turned back off because I manually overrode by moving the stop loss. So you can always manually take over a trade whenever you want. And then when you're ready, I can just enable the auto trailing again, and boom, there we go. My stop loss is back at the EMA 50 again. Okay, so I think we're done with Dean's question there.